I suppose it would be best to begin with what it's like. And rather than a list of symptoms or studies, I'd like to tell a story that might help paint the picture a little bit. When I was about 10 years old, my family had been able to go to this local pool, like maybe run by a YMCA or something, I can't quite recall, but very large, inelegant, nothing fancy, always full of people, but a really fun experience. And as a child, I really wanted to get to the deep end. I wanted to prove that I could do that. I could swim out there. And I wasn't the best swimmer, but eventually I was able to do that. I was able to tread the water, to swim and all this stuff and get to the 6 feet, 12 feet, 20 feet deep areas. I wasn't quite brave enough to swim to the bottom and touch at the super deep depths, but I was proud of myself for being able to conquer this fear and being able to make it out there. And that year, that summer, we went to the beach, and I only got to go to the beach once a year. And if the weather held out, if we were lucky, that meant I could go to the ocean maybe 5 times. And I was real excited. I loved going out there, and I had just gotten to the point where I had conquered my fear of the waves. My parents had repeatedly told me about how all you have to do is get out past the breakers, and it's very calm, it's very pleasant, and you can just float and be at one with the entire ocean. And I really wanted to be able to do that, because many times they would go out there and just float around, and I'd just kind of be in front of the breakers, and I might play in the waves, or especially the tidal pools. But I wanted to conquer this. I wanted to get out there, and with the help of my father helping pull me over some of the larger waves, I made it out there. And several times actually during that trip, we were out there past the breakers, and it really was nice. We seemed to luck out and have wonderful weather, and the tide was always really kind and very calm. And so I'd get out there and be like, man, this is just so wonderful, so tranquil. And here I am out here with the adults in the, in my head, it was like the deep end of the ocean, even though we know it's not. Anyway, one day, we're out there and past the breakers, and they get tired, they want to go in, and I said, I'm going to stay here just a little bit longer. And they're calling me to the shore, saying, all right, let's go in. And I become aware that I can't really get to them. My feet, my toes just barely are scraping against the sand, but it feels like I'm on some sort of treadmill. I can't seem to move. And as each little rise and fall of the tide sort of passed me, that this strange invisible hand was grabbing my ankles and pulling me down and back out to the ocean. It was starting to scare me a little bit, and I started to swim as hard as I could, my arms flailing and just kicking with everything in my body. And I'm not going anywhere. In fact, it feels like I'm going the opposite way. The harder I struggle, the more it seems like I'm being drug out into the murky deep. And my father is getting a little impatient, saying, come on, let's go in. And I'm fighting, and I'm starting to splash, and I'm starting to panic because I can't move. I can't get away from it. Something has me, and it's pulling me, and I can't get away. And I eventually start to yell out, I can't move. I don't understand what's happening. Now, my yell caught the attention of a lifeguard who hopped down from their chair with their little flotation device in hand and started to walk with purpose over to where my father was, staring at me. And my father starts walking towards the water, and I'm noticing that I'm fighting so hard to swim, and I've been out there so long that my legs are beginning to cramp, and everything about me, it's starting to hurt, and the panic is setting in, and I can't really breathe, and I'm terrified, and I don't know how I'm going to survive. And then suddenly the fears that I had when I would go deep underwater in the pool, back at home, hundreds and hundreds of miles away, that scary deep end, the scariest thing about it was I went too far down and didn't take in enough air. And I thought about how hard I had to fight to get to the surface, to break that surface so I could breathe again. As I was out there swimming against this undertow, I started to flash on that and think, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to make it. I can't get away. And tears filled my eyes as desperation and panic completely overtook me. Because again, some invisible thing had me. And the harder I fought, the worse it seemed to get. I had now been pulled out far enough to where my toes were not scraping the sand. So I couldn't touch the bottom. So I couldn't stop kicking. I couldn't stop swimming. I had to keep going. Don't stop. Because I sincerely thought, I'm going to drown. This is it. This is how I'm going to die. And the lifeguard's voice kind of cuts through my panic. He blows this whistle to try to get my attention. And he tells me, swim to my side, swim to my left or to my right. And so I do. I start trying to go, instead of trying to go straight to the shore, I go to the side, completely parallel to the shoreline. And as I do, I don't know if he knew it or not, but I did kind of reach a sandbar, and as I was going to the side, it wasn't pulling on me quite as hard. And I was able to break free, get to that sandbar, and I was able to kind of walk against, I could still feel this current pulling me, but it wasn't nearly as strong. And able, as I was able to get to a place where there was some sand, I could push myself forward. And then I was able to get to where the breakers were and almost kind of ride a wave in a little bit just with my body. And as I got to the shore, my father and mother, they were suddenly kind of aware that just how panicked I was and how frightened I was, and it dawned on them that I wasn't playing around and that I wasn't kidding, as I was saying I can't get out. I can't get to the shore. And the lifeguard didn't have to come in, much more than up to his knees, as he was instructing me, and he patted me on the shoulder, and you okay, buddy? All this kind of stuff. And of course, I want to act like I'm brave now, and all that kind of thing. But that experience of being taken down by something and no one else can see it. Maybe they don't even believe that it's happening, but it's something that's got this grip on you, and you can't seem to fight it off. You can't seem to get away. You can't seem to break free of it. And it almost seems like the harder you fight, the worse it is, the harder it grips you. That to me is what living with major depression feels like. It's invisible to others, just like that undertow, just like that riptide. Other people can't see it, but we are victim to it. And we can fight, but sometimes we have to do things that are almost illogical in the moment, like swimming sideways to get away from it, to get to a sandbar, to get some sort of relief. In a lot of my writing, in a lot of my music, I've returned time and time again to the imagery of the tide, the imagery of water and the ocean. I've done it on my last few records. And, like the 12 people that listen to my music may have even noticed that every so often I seem to return to this water thing. And, why would I even name this podcast? Why would I name it Beneath the Tide? And it's because that imagery and that experience has stayed with me. The terror of being pulled down, but also that feeling of helplessness, that feeling of, how do I fight this thing? It doesn't get tired. It grabbed me at my ankle and began pulling. And though my muscles cramped, though I became exhausted, though I became panicked, this force, almost bemused, apathetic, only pulled, doesn't strain, doesn't get tired, experiences no fatigue, takes not a single break. It just pulls down. That is very much like the experience of depression at its worst. This force pulling you downward, and it just stays with you. It's constant. And the thing about it is that, we are our minds. Our minds are us. And so when there is this gravity, this riptide pulling downward, if we feel like we can't fight it, if we feel like we cannot get away, and we feel like this force, this beast that is immune to being fatigued or tired, then it's very easy to surrender. It's very easy to give up. Because unlike that force, our muscles will cramp. We will get fatigued. We will tire. There's an interesting phenomenon called the illusion of external agency. And it kind of works like this, let's say you think to yourself, I just had this delicious cinnamon roll, and that made me happy. We think that these outside forces, these external agents, are responsible for our happiness. So like, man, this cinnamon roll, this is delicious. That made me happy. What we're not thinking is that my brain is telling me to be happy because I ate the cinnamon roll. And that's actually what happens. And that'd be a confusing way of putting it. Like, we wouldn't naturally speak that way, of course. But when we think of us, when we think of who we are you thinking of your brain and body, or only a portion of it? You're probably thinking of the whole thing. But our conscious self is really only this fraction of the total mind. And it's not something we can easily accept, if you think of the self, the you that's in control of your body, whatever, your experiences, the corporeal experiences, the intangible things, the emotional experiences, the tactile experiences, you are the experiencer, you are the thinker, you are the feeler, you are the responder. And there are these situations where that sensation that you are you, that you own this self, they can kind of be manipulated. So think back, like, man, this cinnamon roll made me happy. This thing made me happy. But actually, my brain is telling me to do that. It's a strange, strange thing. Now, imagine that your brain isn't telling you to be happy. Or imagine, rather, you eat the cinnamon roll, but your brain doesn't tell you to be happy. And you think, why is this? What is the problem? This thing, this external agent, is supposed to make me happy. This is something I enjoy. But that's how major depressive disorder interrupts that flow. It shatters the illusion of external agency because the brain stops that flow of information. When we're in the depressed brain, whether it is some sort of chemical imbalance, brain damage, all sorts, trauma, whatever has led to the brain being in this particular stasis, I've always thought of it as you become immune to joy. You're inoculated against happiness or feeling good. Because again, the external agency thing, it sort of shows that. If you've ever felt this, you lie there and this thing that should bring you joy, should bring you comfort, should bring a smile to your face, and yet it doesn't. And it is an illusion that this thing, whatever it may be, for me, many times it's been music or food or whatever. For whatever reason, it's not doing that for me anymore. The external agency is an illusion in and of itself because those things, when I experience them, whatever they would be, playing music, listening to music, eating that cinnamon roll, whatever, my brain was telling me, I'm enjoying this. I like this. I'm happy. I'm whatever. It's this reaction to the stimuli. And so I'm impressing upon this thing that it makes me do this, but actually it causes something in my brain to tell me to feel this way. So when we are in that depressed mindset, when we're in that dark place, that can get short-circuited. And it's confusing because if we don't even realize the illusion of external agency, then we're kind of at a loss. This thing should do this. Why doesn't it do it anymore? I guess I don't like this anymore. And when the wiring in our brain is a little off balance or completely rewired in some cases, we're in a very, very dangerous place because we can believe that we're actually incapable of feeling any better, of feeling any different. And so what is so pernicious about this disorder is how deceptive it really is. Just like I made mention of with the ocean story, with the Riptide. Other people can't see it. They don't know how desperate your situation may be until it's too late, because the current is beneath the surface. It may be strong enough to rip you in half, but the surface of the water may seem very calm And so people may not be able to tell how desperate the situation is because it's hidden. Just like inside our head, we project something outwardly. We sort of create this version of ourselves that we want others to see. And, we do that in all sorts of ways that, are stereotypical. The clothing we wear, how we wear our hair, people wearing makeup or this, that, or the other thing. We want to project an image to others. And we want to feel attractive or this, that, or the other thing. That's a natural human desire. But we also try to project something else to the world. Somebody says, "How are you doing?" Most of us will say, "Fine," or this, that, or the other thing, especially if it's verbal. And to be fair, "How are you doing?" has become a colloquial greeting rather than a sincere request to find out your state of mind or body or anything. So, fair enough. But we do project an image of ourselves on our social media, at our jobs, to our friends, to our families, many times of being in a better place than we are. People that know me would be surprised to find out that I still do conceal and filter a great deal. And I overshare all the time. I believe I may have some sort of monopoly on the number of people that have unfollowed me or no longer associate with me because I'm a bit too open with my mental health battles and what have you. And I begrudge them not even a little bit because I get it. If you want to kind of surround yourself with a different kind of aura that's not going to include any of that kind of dark stuff, that's fair. We need to be able to surround ourselves with the aesthetic of our choosing, for certain. But even in my honesty and advocacy for suicide prevention, for mental health awareness, and all these kinds of things, I still lie. I still conceal. I still hide. Because at my worst, at my absolute worst, when I don't think I can continue anymore kind of worst, it can be hard to be that level of honest. The fear of the repercussions. And so I've been in rooms with people before where I have that day fantasized, imagined, even planned on how I would end my own life, and told jokes and laughed and put on the face that I knew someone might want from me. I can be a very funny guy when people need sometimes. I can have pretty funny perspectives on things. As someone pointed out the other day, I'm actually a very apt impressionist. And I do like making people laugh. I like entertaining people. Makes me feel good. And I've done just that. I've performed on stage as a singer, guitar player, drummer, whatever, on days where I, knew I'm not gonna be here tomorrow, that kind of thing, like that level of certainty. And it's that riptide. It's why we have to remind ourselves sometimes we have no idea what someone else is going through. Because if I were to ask you to say, okay, we're going to go out to this point in the ocean, just beyond the breakers. Now, if you are just a casual like me, I go swim in the ocean 5 times in a year, once a year with my family, not an oceanographer, not someone who lives at the coast, not someone who can tell all sorts of things. There may be all sorts of signs that you can see, subtle things about the way the water's moving, the way certain animals may interact with it. You may be able to look out there and tell, I bet there's an undertow right there. I bet there's a riptide right there. But if I told you to just go out blindly and you didn't have that kind of experience, how would you know? How would you know there's a riptide waiting for you right there? Or that person, that child that's out there swimming, how do you know they're not going to get caught? So when we see somebody, and it doesn't matter to me whether they are morose or if they are jovial, how do you know there's not an undertow there? Because all you can see is the surface. And the other side of this thing, like I said, with that external agency thing, the other illusion is that we who experience this, we can convince ourselves that we can't feel anything good. Because the illusion of external agency tells us, well, we don't like this anymore. Nothing feels good anymore. All is bad. But if we stopped for a second and said, well, my brain is not telling me that I like this. We instead own that. We take that as ourselves because we are our brains, remember? So therefore, I don't like this anymore. I hate this, or whatever it may be. But if we paused for a second and said, my brain is not responding to something I love, maybe something's amiss. Mental illness is a good term, and I hope that that italicization of that term came through. If we thought of it as illness, then we would think about how do we treat it? How do we help it? How do we cope with it? How can we do something about it? Instead, many times we're met with this, well, just cheer up. Or you like this, let's do this. And that is exactly where a lot of people that don't understand depression have their misstep. Look up the illusion of external agency. And then think about the idea that it is our brains that are telling us what we like, what we don't like. That cinnamon roll, that cupcake, that potato chip, that whatever your vice is, that carrot if you're a vegan maybe. Whatever it is, your brain is telling you to react to that in a positive or negative way. And it's not that it's illusory in the fact that it's not real. It's just that we're sort of misattributing things. And if our brain can tell us that it likes something, our brain can tell us it doesn't like something, but our brains can also misfire. If you've ever had surgery or something like that, or even went to the dentist, got some laughing gas or whatever, or you've taken any kind of drug, psychedelic, something that alters the mind, you may have had experiences that felt intensely real, but weren't there. The brain was fooled. Every night we go to sleep and our brain drifts off. Have you ever had the experience of waking up and you could have sworn it happened? The dream was so real, so vivid. I could touch it. I could taste it. It was a real event. It takes you a couple minutes just to figure out, okay, wait. Did that happen? No, wait, that didn't happen. If your brain can be fooled just by the act of going to sleep, then perhaps different things, such as chemical imbalances, such as trauma, such as stress, such as whatever, perhaps some of those things could also fool our brains, rewire our brains, make our brains believe something that isn't so, such as, I don't like this anymore, or I don't want to be here. It's a strange phenomenon as I said. And I think the tough part for many people that have never experienced this is that it's hard to imagine. When many people think of depression, they don't think of a riptide that is just tirelessly pulling on them. They think of some sadness or some temporary emotional state that could almost be bargained with or wrestled out. You know, when we lose a job or something like that, or we lose a significant other to a breakup or whatever happens, many times the very passage of time itself will heal the wound. It's very common with things like grief and all that. The passage of time does offer a bit of lenity to us. Not always, but often. And, many times it just takes getting that new job, getting that different job, or connecting with a new mate. And what is conventional wisdom? Oh, it comes when you're not looking for it. And many times we end up with someone better than we would have expected, or a better job than we would have expected. Again, I'm not saying that's always the case, but talk to somebody maybe it's you yourself, maybe it's somebody that you know, but you probably know somebody that has attained something that they weren't quite looking for. It just sort of happened. And they look back on the loss of this job or the loss of this opportunity or the loss of this person many times as, I've heard it said so many times, it's a cliche practically. Oh, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Right? We've heard that before. Losing X, Y, or Z, that was the best thing that could have happened to me. In the moment, we didn't feel like that. And for a lot of people, I think they equate that devastation, that grief, that loss, that despair, they equate that to depression. We use that term erroneously. We say, man, I'm so depressed and everything. Like on your social media, many times I've never done it, so I don't even know if it's still a thing, but I think for a time it was. Forgive me, I'm showing my considerable 100 years, but you could choose like your mood. So you could say like, oh, I'm feeling happy or feeling psyched or feeling heartbroken or whatever, and many times you could feel, I'm feeling depressed. Now, I honestly have not done the research into it. I should at some point, and I think I will, into what came first, the chicken or the egg. Like, was depression, was that a term referring to this condition that then got turned into this colloquialism referring to despair, sadness, loss, whatever? Or was it the other way around? And it was a colloquialism that got sort of codified in the psychological community. I'd be curious just to know. But anyway, what really matters here is that depression isn't sadness. You notice that the things I used to describe it at the start of this was water, riptide, undertow, just this gravity, this force pulling you down without letting go. It's not necessarily a sadness. It's something just holding you down at the bottom. Many times it's flat, it's hollow, it's empty, it's cold. Or to use the imagery from one of the notes referenced in the incredible book Night Falls Fast, It's like a sweltering sauna. You cannot get comfortable. It's just awful. Everything about you, every pore, every flake of skin is uncomfortable. And it's these kinds of terms, they don't sound as dramatic, they don't even sound as poetic as the absolute bottom of despair and sorrow and all those kinds of things. But major depressive disorder doesn't always manifest that way. It's not that you don't have those despairing moments. Several of us, I hesitate to say all, but most of us will. The hopelessness, the emptiness, the meaninglessness, it will weigh upon us and sort of create that despairing reaction. But it's the emptiness, it's the hopelessness, the expressionlessness of the depression that really is the catalyst of that. Unless you've felt it, it's really hard to imagine. It's really hard to experience. But it's why many people in the grip of this kind of thing, they'll just stay in bed. And it's not that they're staying in bed sobbing into their pillows uncontrollably. We do that in the face of great sorrow, great loss, great despair. Yes. I've done that grieving for my father of late. And it's a real and necessary part of the human condition. But the dangerous depression doesn't look like that. It's not this shakingly, uncontrollably sad outpouring of horrible negative emotions. It's this mute, tasteless thing. It's just lying in the bed, staring at the ceiling fan. The room is gray. The bland hum of the air conditioner is running. The world passing by outside. And you can't find the will to do anything, or even the resource to feel something. And want doesn't come into play. Your brain has told you you don't want anything. So you don't eat. You don't drink. You don't care what you look like. You don't shower. You don't move. That thing you need to do, who cares? Don't do it. The places you find your little pleasures, those little joys that get you through the week. Who cares about those? That's the danger of depression. That's what makes it a threat to people. It inoculates us against joy, against anything. And that's when you give up. That's when you stop fighting. That's why the depressed mind says, who cares? What does it matter? And because of the illusion of external agency, we think that that's the truth. We don't think I'm having an episode. I'm fighting with my mind right now. We many times think, no, this is reality. I'm seeing things very clearly. I've never seen things more clearly in my life. But it's an illusion. And that is the tough part. That is the toughest part of fighting against depression, is that we are our minds, and our minds are us. Believe it or not, I did even that same trip to the beach, I did return to going past the breakers. I was still young enough to not be completely afraid, and part of why I wasn't afraid was my father said he wouldn't leave me behind. And so as long as he was with me, I'd be safe. Big man, strong man, he can fight this undertow. The undertow won't take him. And I took solace in that. I suppose part of the reason I've decided to start talking about this stuff with this hopefully not too disappointing introduction is because I don't have him anymore. I made it through a lot because I had this big, strong guy that was with me when the undertow pulled me under the surface. There was a hand I clung to that was too powerful for the undertow. But now, I'm not a kid anymore. And that gentle, giant presence is gone. As we all do, we have to find a way, and I have to find a way, to fight against that undertow, to push back, find the sandbar, and get back to the shore. I hope that just by talking through these things, that I might accomplish two things. On one hand, selfish goal, I hope it will help me to deal with my own mind and to win the war against myself. The more noble and altruistic goal is to perhaps find a way to give voice to things about these mental health struggles to those that may not know how to articulate them, may not feel safe articulating them, or may not even realize they need to articulate them. So, I believe that will wrap up my first episode of Beneath the Tide. If you listened to this whole thing, I cannot begin to thank you enough for allowing me to take up a portion of your time. I'm sincerely glad that you are alive. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you push through each day. Not always easy, and that is a victory, no matter what anyone will tell you. I hope to talk to you soon.